Hello there. If you saw the title, you know what the video is about. Evangelion is one of my favorite shows. End of Evangelion is one of my favorite movies. I would call them both masterpieces. I think that's fair. But the rebuilds or the new theatrical editions of Eva, I think are complete trash. They're all bad. All three of them are bad. But today, I want to talk about the unreleased fourth one, 3.0 plus 1.0. This is just going to be a very unstructured, unscripted rant, really, about why I think it's going to suck. And I just want to put this out there. The reason I'm doing this is because when it comes out and it's bad, I just want to say, like, oh, I called it. Like, I knew it was going to be bad ahead of time. And I just want to put my thoughts out there before it comes out. So I can be like, yep, I called it. Knew it would suck. Yeah, so why do I think it's going to be shit? Because so the first three films in the rebuilds are have pretty much direct comparisons to the series. The first two are literally just the series retold with small differences. And the third one, a little bit better for going in a different direction. But the fourth one, the final one, so it's got to deliver on the title, Thrice Upon a Time. So it's the finale. It's going to be a direct comparison to End of Eva, the film. And it's just not going to live up to that. It's not going to have anything that made that film special. So it's not going to... Do you think it's going to start with real life... showing the real life death threats that were sent to Anno and Gynax? It's not. It's not going to start with a sequence of people in the cinema watching, sort of reminding you that it's not going to have any of that real life stuff to contextualize this as just a film made by real people. It's not going to have anything interesting like the live action sequence where you see the city and you see Rei, Misato, and Asuka in real life. That really was a cool part of the end of Eva. Taking you out of the anime part and making you think about the anime in a real life context and, how much importance you're placing on this fictional show that you didn't like the ending of, So I feel like it's well documented in the text of the show. Shinji projecting sort of his problems onto the women in his life. And I feel like the part where you see the girls in real life is kind of meant to make you think about, I guess, how you might be similar to Shinji that way, by using these characters and making you think critically about the way you're thinking about the female characters in the show. And think about the fact that in that trip out sequence during Third Impact, there is a shot in the hundreds of frames flashing past super quick. There is a couple frames of real life figures of the female characters. And I mean, I definitely feel like the rebuilds so far haven't had any of that kind of thought-provoking commentary on Shinji's dependency and the viewer's dependency. And that's not going to that's people think that the fourth film is suddenly going to turn around and be something completely different from the first three films. It's not. There's not going to be a random switch up or subversion. This is not going to suddenly become an art house masterpiece. It's going to be exactly the same as the last three, which is less of a focus on the characters and their problems like the show was, and it's going to be a focus on what the rebuilds are, which is big fights, a Oh wait, sorry. Circling back to the figures, like that, there's not gonna be that because look at what Ava is right now. It's it's product. It's definitely more of a product than it was. I think I remember reading somewhere when Ava was first pitched that. And I'm not going to provide sources for anything I'm saying because it's all off the top of my head. But I remember reading somewhere about how some exec producer or something wasn't sure how profitable the mech designs could be because they were so organic and different to like other mechs at the time. But yeah, like it's product now. So you're not going to see that commentary on the figures because it needs the figures. Like there's that video on YouTube about how you can live entirely off Evangelion merch. And I feel like as well, you can see it in the film how every Ava needs to have like 10 different forms to sell different figures. Like look at Asuka and Unit. Yeah, you look at Asuka and how many different forms her mech has. Like it's got like the beast mode, it looks like a dog at one point. Yeah, and that's not story relevant at all. It's not like Shinji's Berserk mode where it's relevant to the story and contextualized. These are just to sell different figures. And why the Ava parts all need like a lot of different outfits. And why their plug suits will keep changing. So they can sell more figures. It's just so blatant how much of an advertisement these movies are. More than a piece of thoughtful kino. What was I saying? Before I got sidetracked by that. Yeah, so going back to what the rebuilds are about. It's about big fights, and it's about uninteresting questions that have uninteresting answers. So it's not about the characters and emotionally what they're going through and how you can relate that back to you. Because I feel like a lot of people can relate to what the characters in the show are going through, like how Rey feels expendable because she's literally replaceable at any moment, and how, you know, Asuka, when you tie your self-worth completely to your job. These are things that people actually experience, so you can take something away from the show. With the rebuilds, there is almost nothing that you can take away, because the questions are like not about the characters, they're about like, oh, what are the memories of Eternals, or whatever they're called, or like, why are there 2 Lances of Longinus, and like, why are the characters still look 14, even though it's been 14 years since like the near third impact, and like, what is that even, near third impact? And I feel like the people that, I suppose Anno and the other people that write the rebuilds, what they have chosen to take away, the people enjoyed from Ava, was stuff that really was just truthfully filler to get to the juice, which was like the characters. They took the lore and the heavy story stuff about like the angels and Adam, which is all interesting. It is. But it's not the main focus of the show, Evangelion. The main focus is the characters, and now they've made it totally about the angels and the Avas and bullshit like that, which is not very interesting. Like, yeah, what is this mass Ava graveyard under Nerve or whatever, like, and the world turning red in the 4th one, and they have to, like, purify it. I've only watched the first, like, 10 minutes in Paris once, and I didn't enjoy it. It just seems like not very. What will be the payoff when we find out the answers to these questions? It will be a lot of unless they like, they won't, like, that's what I'm saying, that they won't find. I was about to say unless they find an interesting way to tie it back to the themes of the characters, but they won't. That's what the whole point of this is. These questions aren't going to have answers that are personally satisfying. They're only going to be satisfying in a lore sense, so that people can make videos picking apart like the timeline of Ava, and is this like a loop to do with the show and end of Ava? Who cares? Who cares? It doesn't matter if it's a time loop from the show. What would that mean? Yeah, and like, is Mari the child of Shinji and Asuka? Who cares? Mari's a shit character. People think she's going to turn around in the last movie and is going to be interesting. If they were going to make her interesting, they would have done it in the last 2 movies she was in. But notice how she's just there to sell figures, because they didn't have a glasses character in the show, or like an Ava pilot with glasses rather, and we really need that because glasses are hot, so she's got to be in there. She has no it's just comparing her to what the pilots were in the show, how they all had something interesting going on. Mari has nothing going on. She just swears, which is cool and edgy. Whoa, and she likes to kill angels. And that's it. And she's horny for LCL. That's it. That's her entire character summed up. She's just so stupid. She's totally pointless. And yeah. What else? Yeah, so like these characters aren't going to have like Mari and the rest of them in the rebuilds, because they're all different now. Everyone is a different character. Going back to my actual point about why this is going to be a bad movie compared to End of Ava. These are all totally different characters, which is not a bad thing, but who also have nothing like to say. And like they have really, as they've done in the rebuilds, have simplified each character down so much that they... If this... words. Doesn't work as a follow-up to Ava because they've been scrubbed down so much that they're not really the same people. And if it's meant to be like a complete reboot, they're uninteresting. Even taken out of context of the show, they're boring characters who, like, just by normal script, screenwriting, film standards have no point to them. Because now, based on the trailers that we've seen for 4, 3.0 plus 1.0, Shinji is just going to be... And you don't even need the trailer. This happens in the second one as well. Shinji's just going to be a normal, badass, heroic anime character, which is so fucking lazy and, like, reductive. Because Shinji was so interesting already. Just being indecisive. That was his whole thing, and it was awesome. I loved that. Made him an interesting character. Now he's just a badass who saves, like, the day. He saved Rei in the second one. He's gonna do something cool in this. He's gonna have a badass fight scene, which is very just... it's bad. That whole scene in 2 was so bad when he went full beast mode and saved Rei. Like, who is that guy? It's just not Shinji. It's just a much more boring version of Shinji. I feel like maybe they took all these comments about Shinji being annoying way too, like... to heart from annoying fans who are like, oh, Shinji's so annoying, get him the robot, funny joke. It was never funny. And I feel like those people who think that Shinji's being annoying for being indecisive and stuff, who have missed the whole point of the character, have actually now probably had an adverse effect on the rebuilds. Because now I've seen people suddenly say that they like Shinji a lot more in this. And that this is the version you should watch instead because... Oh, Shinji's less annoying. Whew, which is just blood boiling. Yeah, like... Yeah, Shinji isn't really his indecisive self anymore. This is a very small nitpick, but I just want to point out that I watched the first episode of... a while ago. I watched the first episode of Ava, and I watched the Netflix version, the original dub and sub version, and then I watched the rebuild version of the first episode back to back, just to compare the small differences. I just want to point out, this is a very small nitpick, but in that scene, in the very first scene where you meet Shinji, the difference in the dialogue between the original and the rebuild is pretty big. Like, he says in the first one, he's like, oh, it's no use, I can't get through, basically, maybe I should find, like, a shelter, or, like, I should probably find a shelter. And then in the rebuild, which, by the way, informs you in the very first scene of a little bit about Shinji's character. He's, like, defeatist attitude, he is kind of indecisive, he's like, oh, maybe I should get to a shelter, like, should I? It's like, tells you something about him. And then in the rebuild, what does he say? He says, oh, the phone's dead. Oh, and the buses and the trains aren't working either. Well, what the fuck does that tell us about Shinji? Absolutely nothing. And I feel like that is representative of the approach of the entire like film series. Like, what about Asuka in the rebuilds? What is her deal? Does she struggle with meeting everyone's expectations? Does she struggle with meeting her own expectations about what she should be as a pilot? I don't remember. If there's a scene like that, I can't remember. I haven't watched them all back to back in a while. But if there is a scene like that, I can't remember it. I think there's one scene where she's talking to that doll in her hand. And why did they change her name? It's such a weird detail to change, but that doesn't seem to serve any purpose at all. Just, that's not a nitpick. That's just me wondering why they would change something so insignificant. Rey, as far as I can remember, doesn't really seem to do... She has no character, actually, as far as I remember. Doesn't really seem to care or do anything one way or the other. Yeah, I don't really remember. See, I'm trying really hard to remember, like, what any of them actually... I can remember, like, plot beats from the rebuilds, because it's all plot, and I'm using inverted quotation marks there, and no actual character stuff. And, like, I have a hard time... Like, if you go back in my rebuild Blu-rays, there's, like, the booklets that come with it, with interviews with Arno and stuff, talking about how, like, he planned on releasing the third and fourth... This is back when he released the first rebuild in 2007. He said, oh, I plan on releasing the third and the fourth at the same time. Look how that turned out. But I have a hard time believing any of these films were planned at all. Because the first two rebuilds... The first one is just the show, with barely any differences. The second one is... slightly different until the end when it gets really different, but still pretty bad. And then the third one is so totally different. I don't believe that any of these were planned together. They're just making it up because no one actually cares about what's happening in these movies. Arno doesn't, I don't think. In fact, I am 100% sure that he doesn't give a fuck about what's happening in these movies. There's no grand overarching narrative. It's not all going to tie back in the fourth one and make you think like, oh, they were setting that up from the beginning. That's what that meant. No, there's not. That's not going to happen. They are completely... Like, having a massive time gap between the second and the third one. I mean, the first two minus will not even mean anything. Which is good, because they're bad. But, like... Yeah, it's just, like... So totally pointless. Everything that's happened up till now. Yeah. They don't have a story. Really, not a good one. It's going to be hard to wrap up all these... It's going to be hard to have a satisfying conclusion to this last one. I'm trying to think, like... If there's... What the actual plot stakes could be. Who they're, like... It's just a pissing contest, really, between Misato and Gendo at this point. Yeah. But they seem like really the only people left in the world in the third one. So what's the point? You don't really see much of the outside world. Now I'm being a bit lazy and unclear about what I mean. Not really articulating well, but that's because I feel like the movie also is very lazy and unclear as well, and does a bad job at articulating things. I think in the show, when you were in the dark on things, it felt like at least there was an idea of like of what there was going to be a payoff later, and you would eventually understand, and you did. By the end of the show and the end of Eva, I felt like most of the concepts they throw at you at the start are explained to the point where you can understand pretty much everything. Even though it is a very, like, it's meant to be like a, ooh, confusing, mysterious show. Whereas I feel like the reason, so I feel like it was in the show, the reason everything was mysterious was because it was going somewhere and it was being set up and made you anticipate what everything meant. It was all building the tension. Whereas in the reboots, I feel like things are set up that because mysteries are set up just because that's what Ava does. They just want to try and confuse people now, I feel like, for no reason. I don't feel like the mysteries that are set up matter, or that they're going to be explained in the fourth one, or that they're important at all. It's just because that's like, it's more riding off the coattails of what Ava's like supposed meme identity is, I guess. That like they say that it's filled with a bunch of people saying vague like statements that allude to things that's like mysterious, and that's just what Ava is. Yeah, it's kind of like how people say Metal Gear is like really confusing, but once you play it, you get everything, and it's like not that confusing. It's like Ava, it is confusing at the start, but you get everything by the end. But I feel like now it's just confusing and mysterious for the sake of it. If that makes sense. Like there's no reason for it to be as confusing as it is, and unexplained as it is. I remember I read a while ago, like, a producer at Kara said that, like, actually said that they were going to simplify things because the style of storytelling that worked in the 90s doesn't work now. And, yeah, I feel like you can see that with what I'm saying, like, this is simple Ava. This is simple Ava for people that want to experience, they want to feel like they've watched Ava and understand like the references and like the, say they get the identity, like get the whole identity of it and like, oh, I can relate to also being in the dark and confused. But they're not, because it's not the same. I don't feel like I'm making sense. Yeah. Because, like, people are saying this is the same as the show, but it's blatantly not. It's just trying to copy the show, but without putting in the effort. Like the producer said, because they're not putting in the same effort. They're trying to make this a poor man's Ava for a new generation. People who don't really want to invest more effort into watching it, I guess, that don't want to think too hard about what's happening, which is why they don't really throw anything confronting on the screen in the rebuilds. Nothing really challenging, just a bunch of loud imagery to confuse you. By the way, visually it is such a, like, I'm talking about the visual style because it's so visually loud in the rebuilds. Like, remember when Angel died and it was like a cross would show up and it was like a big deal, and now it's like something happens and there's like a bajillion trillion crosses like all over the screen, and there's like all these, there's like a sound effect for, there's like a weird screaming sound effect for everything an angel does, and like there's always those red rings appearing everywhere. And I think there's something Buddhist I read, that's like some Buddhist symbol. But it's all just visual noise. Like all the memories of eternity or whatever they're called, like the Ava failures, like there's just so much shit they throw at you on screen. That has no meaning. It's just there because the movie had confusing imagery as well, which probably also didn't mean like too much. Like I remember listening to like the commentary track on End of Ava with like an anime enthusiast who was trying to like explain all the religious and spiritual imagery, and they sort of like joke about how like most of it is put there because Anna was like, oh, I want cool Christian imagery that doesn't mean anything, like the Sephirothic tree and stuff. But like, I think it's not fair to say it was all the imagery in Ava is like wanky and meaningless. Like definitely the female genital imagery in End of Ava seems intentional and like relates back to the what Shinji's going through, I feel. Whereas there's nothing like that in the rebuilds, and there's not going to be either, because haven't the previous 3 films, they've all been either M-rated or PG in Australia, probably to appeal to the target demographic of fucking children and teenagers who just want to watch robots fight each other, and not have to think too hard, not have to think too hard about like the director's psychosis and like suicidal thoughts and problems with women, like imposter syndrome and all that other bullshit. This is basically a kids movie. Like, even look at the visually, like the fights as well. End of Ava has like one of the best fight scenes in the show, Asuka versus the mass-produced Avas, where it's like, oh, everything feels like she's actually in a massive robot. It's all slow and sluggish, and the hits all have like a good amount of like wind up and like impact, and like things going crunch and getting destroyed when they get hit. Whereas in the rebuilds, everyone's flipping around like a damn Power Ranger, and everyone's zipping around, and it's super fast, and like they look like they're completely weightless, which just looks worse by comparison. It's just not very visually exciting to watch. I guess it's kind of a spectacle to see. Like it's like some good animation, but it's not like nothing you haven't really seen before. I don't know, it's just boring compared to what we had. And there's not going to be anything like some really cool visual spectacle like Asuka's like Unit 2 being disemboweled after the fight against the mass production Avas. There's not going to be anything like that. That was like fucking horrific to look at. Or like everything in Third Impact, like the angel heads morphing into, the Ava heads morphing into Rey and stuff, and like, everything. That was gross to look at. There's not going to be anything like that. Even compare like the versions of Third Impact that we've seen. Oh yeah, and the pop song. Even compare the fact that they just slapped on a much worse, lazier pop song, because that's what they did in the movie. They just had it felt like the pop song here was just incidental because they had it before. Whereas Come Sister Todd is not only a great song, but also like lyrics written by Arno that are relevant. And it's still like I listen to it when I'm sad. It's a good song. Like, it's a sad fucking song to listen to. Whereas like I've never once listened to the song from 2.0 again, because it was boring, and it was clearly just put there because like that's what they did the first time. Without really understanding what made the first one so appealing and interesting. Yeah, and like other weird visuals that we won't get. We won't get like anything like in the quick flash of like imagery, there are a couple of animation cells like flipped upside down, I'm pretty sure. So you see like the underside, which is normally only a side that like the animators see. So you're seeing like the reverse, like the side of the image, which is a pretty neat detail. I don't know, seeing it from like the perspective of the people working on it would see more. It's just very clear, and that was in the show as well, by the way. It's just very clear that nothing wacky or like wild or experimental like that is going to happen, which is what makes it so disappointing, because we're comparing it to like one of the best anime films ever, which is unique in like every aspect, and and then like the remake of that is going to be something that's just generic, which is incredibly disappointing. Oh yeah, and you think we're gonna have a scene like Shinji and comatose Asuka? I mean, that's not gonna fucking happen. Absolutely not. That would be way too interesting and fucked up for this kids movie. Also, that CG fight in the trailer between, what is it, Unit 13 Iskaros and Unit 1? Oh man, oh god. Oh yeah, and design-wise, all the new Avas and everything in the world looks so shit. Like, Velays, they look overcomplicated. Like, what's Mari's mech? I forget what number unit it is, but like or maybe it's Asuka's, the one that's strapped up with all these different parts, and it's like on that spinning gun around it, and it looks like it's got parts of like Jet Alone and other things like strapped to it. Horrifically ugly. Terribly designed, way too cluttered. Remember how clean and crisp, beautiful the mechs used to look, and now it's like they're so cluttered with shit. Yeah, Vela's ship, fucking ugly. Yeah, everything just looks so much worse, design-wise. And I don't know what was the point of doing it like this. Like, the rib cage and stuff underneath Vela's ship. I don't know what any of it's trying to evoke. Apart from just being visually unappealing to the eyes. Yeah, all of that's basically a long way of saying soul versus soulless. I think you can tell. It's obvious that no one really cared when making these new movies. Especially not Arno. Even if you could say that there was no thought put into the show or end of Ava, even if you could say it's all just sort of random bullshit symbolism, I feel like at least it's not. But I feel like at least he made it when he had something on his mind, something to say, because we made it when he was like peak depression, and I feel like you can see that in the at least his reflected in the characters. Even if you take nothing else away, it says something about the person making it. Whereas it's obvious now that there's nothing to be said. It's obvious to me, I think, that this is what he's doing on the side to make money for the shit he wants to do, like Shin Godzilla and Shin Ultraman. Stuff he probably actually wants to make. Yeah. Like, and to the, I would love to hear from anyone who happens to watch this that thinks the rebuilds are great. Love to hear why. And to people that think the fourth one was going to be great, if this was going to be like you've seen the first three, I feel like now we've seen 3, we know what the last one's gonna be like. It's not gonna be any different. We know what to expect now. They've played their whole hand basically in terms of what's gonna happen stylistically, tonally. Yeah. So that's just what I think. Yeah, let me know if you agree with my rambling.